Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another reading wrap-up video. This is going to be for the month of October. I know my uploads have been a little bit sporadic lately. I have just been hyperfixating on something new and I'm kind of struggling to get in the mood to actually edit videos and film videos. And I don't want to be putting out content like just for the sake of it. I hope you guys don't mind that the uploads are a little sporadic. I mean, it doesn't really matter, this isn't my job and I really don't have kind of like a massive view count or subscriber count, so in some ways it doesn't matter, but I know there are quite a few of you who sometimes comment and I also get a little bit of consistent viewership, so for any of you who have stayed here watching, thank you. I hope you don't mind the sporadic upload. Anyway, in the month of October I managed to read a grand total of 5 books. I was really hoping to read more and in all honesty I didn't really get too much of my TBR from last month, which is a shame because there were a couple of books on there that I was like I really wanted to get to, just didn't manage it. I ended up just reading a lot of spooky books. So a lot of the books that you see in this video I wouldn't have mentioned on my TBR. So without further ado, here is my October reading wrap-up video. The first book that I managed to read in the month of October was actually one that I started back in August, I believe, like the end of August, and that was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy and it's also my first ever Brandon Sanderson book. Now I will be having a reading vlog come out soon where I do talk about kind of how I feel reading my first Brandon Sanderson, because Brandon Sanderson is like a huge deal in the book world online and honestly I was terrified of him. I was terrified of reading one of his books. I decided to start here because I think this is like the first in kind of like a multiverse. So this book is actually told in multiple perspectives, but essentially it is about this world where there is this man or creature or like someone unknown called the Dark Lord who has ruled over this world for thousands of years and no one's ever been able to take him down. There's been plenty of rebellions but they've all failed, and then comes along this unlikely heroine who is a street urchin and she basically has these powers and abilities that they basically hope is going to start the new rebellion. Now, the reason it took me so long to read this is because I'd started reading it at the end of August. I ended up going away to Amsterdam at the beginning of September, which there are going to be travel vlogs coming out at some point when I edit them. And I didn't want to take this away with me because obviously it's a physical book, it's quite heavy. I wanted to just take my phone with like my Kindle app and obviously my Kindle with me because they're lighter, and so I just kind of left this, and then when I got back I just wasn't in the mood to read it. This is quite a heavy fantasy, there's a lot going on. Another reason why I struggled was until the 250 page mark I don't really feel like this book picked up that much. It was slow going. I found myself enjoying some characters' perspectives more than others and I think I go into that in my reading vlog, and so for me it was just a struggle getting through the first quarter of this book. It's quite a chunky book. I think it's nearly like, yeah, it's nearly like 700 pages long, and just until I got to that point nothing really picked up, nothing really piqued my interest that much. The world building and the magic system are really well done and I think the characters that are introduced are also well done, but it was just a lot and it was slow going. I also didn't really feel overly connected to the emotional side of the book. Obviously towards the end of the book a lot of stuff starts happening, the action starts picking up and there are some emotional things that happen, but I didn't really feel connected to them in any way. There was also like a certain plot line that I didn't really connect with. I was excited for it and then I just didn't connect with it. And the other thing that I'll say is this book did not conclude where I thought it would. It does make me excited to move on with this trilogy because I will be carrying on at some point. However, where it ended, I did not expect it to. I was actually kind of taken by surprise if I'm honest, because it makes me wonder like where can this go? Like where is this going? Because in my mind everything in this trilogy was going to be leading towards the takedown of the Dark Lord, and just things didn't go where I thought they would, and honestly it shocked me. Overall I did give this 4 stars. Despite the negative things that I said, I did really enjoy this book. I feel as if it was a lot easier to read than I thought it would be. Sometimes with adult fantasy, I think this is adult, even though there's kind of like a young adult character. Sometimes I find with just like heavier fantasy, it's hard to read. Like it's a lot, and sometimes I need to be in that headspace to take that on, and I think one of the reasons why that puts me off is because I remember I read the first Game of Thrones book. I read that years and years ago and it was kind of like my first introduction to heavier fantasy, and I remembered it was okay, but it was a lot, and I used to get headaches a lot from reading it, and honestly I'd fall asleep because there was too much to take in, there was too much world building, too many characters, and I just couldn't deal with it. But this wasn't that at all. I did actually really enjoy it, so despite the negativity that I've now spouted, this was really good, so 4 stars. So the next book that I read in October was actually an audiobook, so technically I didn't read it, but I listened to Golf is Hard by, I think his real name is Andrew Johnston, but he's known as Beef. As you might have guessed, this is actually about and written by a professional golfer. I want to say he's played in the PGA Tour. I know he's played in the European Tour, I believe. I can't remember specifics, but he is a professional. He has played alongside the likes of Tiger Woods and a bunch of other players, but obviously Tiger Woods, even if you're not in the golf world, everyone knows who Tiger Woods is. And this is basically about kind of like his early life. It's also about his career and what it's like to be a professional golfer. It also involves some of his kind of opinions on the actual culture surrounding golf. And the reason why I listened to this was because I actually started playing golf again at the end of August and decided that I really wanted to get back into it again. I used to be a junior golfer back when I was kind of like in my like early mid-teens, and that was when I was really playing all the time. I was getting coaching, and then as I got older I just kind of gave it up and didn't bother with it anymore. And I played one game kind of like in mid-August and was like, I want to do this again, and I got the bug. So I've basically been consuming a bunch of golf media lately, so this might be a little bit boring, but this was actually a really good audiobook. It was a great insight into what it's like to be a professional golfer. Obviously I will never get to that point. I would love to, but I would just never get there. I really appreciated his opinions on the whole golf culture scene. There were some things where I was like, I don't necessarily think that way, but like, okay. But I really appreciated the fact that he mentioned women golfers, because golf, even though it's becoming more open and definitely a lot more diverse, it still has a long way to go. It is still very much a white male dominated sport, which is such a shame, and you can see it in little ways depending on which golf courses you go to. And just, there was like a viral video, I think like a year or 2 ago, where a literal PGA pro who literally had to go and get a degree, had to go through training, has to have a really low handicap, female PGA pro, got advice from a man at a golf range, and he thought he was helping when he absolutely was not, and he didn't realise who he was talking to. It's not every male golfer that's like that, but like that's very much the culture. Like, it's still very much enshrined, and as a woman I have seen it. Even as a young female junior player, I saw it. Like, it's so bad. It still has a very long way to go, and this was such a great read, and I just really appreciated his kind of opinions on, you know, changing golf culture and getting more women into it, and the fact that some men have egos that are too big for the game. It was such a good read, and I loved the way it was narrated. I do wish it was narrated by him. It was narrated by someone else, but I still really enjoyed it. I didn't give it a rating just because it is someone's story. I don't really give non-fiction ratings anymore, but it was a really good read. And honestly, I think even if you're not into golf, it's still really fascinating, because he goes through kind of like what he thinks about when he hits his shots, like all of his injuries and like how that's affected his game and his psyche, and it honestly, trust me, it's interesting. It's more interesting than I'm selling it to be. So the third book that I read in October was Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning. You guys might have seen my spooky reading vlog, which I uploaded last week, which is technically tomorrow. Technically. So this essentially follows a young actress named Willow, but her name's not technically Willow, and you learn that pretty much straight at the beginning. But she basically has been involved with cancel culture online. She said something that was a bit out of turn, and she has now been cancelled by literally everyone. She's lost her acting job that, you know, was a regular thing for her, and so her agent decides to send her to this camp that is kind of like a cleansing camp. So there's no technology, you're just spending your days with other campers, and she's just going there to kind of get away from everything that's happening and have have kind of like a detox. Obviously, because this is a horror book, it has that kind of like horror slasher vibe. Campers start going missing and winding up dead, and basically there's like an axe murderer going around. So when I went into this book, I wasn't really thinking about what I wanted to get out of it. I was just like, oh, it sounds fun, like I hope I get a fun time. It was okay. But this book didn't really pick up until the last 20%, and then it just became absolute mayhem. It was like, this person's gonna die and that person's gonna die, and bam, bam, bam. And it's like, I wanted it to be a little bit more spread out than it was, and it felt honestly a little bit anticlimactic. I also didn't find the killer aspect very believable. There's kind of like a little twist that happens sort of at the end. The killer just, I didn't find that very believable, honestly. Also, another thing that I didn't really love so much is, considering that this book was centred around cancel culture, and you know, Willow was supposed to have been cancelled for a really like insane reason. When it actually came to the reveal of why she got cancelled, it just seemed really stupid. Like, you know, with cancel culture, you kind of expect people to be cancelled for being racist or misogynistic or like something like serious like that. She was cancelled for a stupid reason. Hashtag I could relate. I didn't exactly get cancelled, but someone doxed me online and it sucked. But it just seemed really silly in the end, and I was like, are you serious? So you literally lost your career and you got cancelled for that reason? Like, it just seemed a bit of a joke. I also didn't really feel like there was enough time to form connections with any of the characters. And I know I went in with little to no expectation with this book. In anything kind of like horror related, you want to root for someone, and I feel like you need to have a connection with that character to root for them. And I never really felt any connection to any of the characters. I was just kind of like, okay, like, let's see who dies. This is going to be fun. Although there was one character that I really liked. I can't remember her name. But you don't really see her that much. She kind of like shows up every now and again, but you don't really learn about her that much. And another thing I really hated was the insta-love. Insta-love is a massive turn off for me in books. I hate it. It's not necessary, especially in a book that's a standalone and like the main plot doesn't really involve romance. Like, it doesn't need to be there. Didn't love that. So overall, I ended up giving this 2 stars. I wasn't expecting anything, but I also kind of thought this might have been a 3-star at least. It wasn't. I gave it 2 stars. Yeah, it was just a bit of a yawn fest. The next book that I read in October was We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. This is another horror book, but this is kind of like more of a psychological kind of horror book, because you get very twisted as a reader. Like, you get very, not confused, you get confused, but like in a really good way. So this essentially follows a queer couple named Charlie and Eve, and they are house flippers, and they end up buying this really old house in the middle of nowhere. You can see where this is going. And one day, I believe it's Eve. Yes, Eve is on her own, Charlie is out somewhere, and this family comes knocking on the door, and basically the father of this family says that this used to be his house when he was younger, and he basically was kind of in the area because his family is moving, and he wants to show his family around the house where he used to live. Now, Eve, being the people-pleasing person that she is, decides to let them in, and then strange things start to happen. That is all I'm gonna say. I feel like you should go into this book knowing very minimal detail, because honestly, this book is a wild ride. I think this might be the first horror book that I've read that I have thoroughly enjoyed. The book overall, honestly, I wrote down total mindfuck, and I think that describes it well. I don't think I need to go into detail. It's like things are happening and then you're wondering if they really happened. This book also uses mixed media, and I feel like I should tell you guys this just to kind of explain it better, but this book first got traction on Reddit, and I believe it won an award on Reddit for like a horror story or whatever. and then publishers picked it up and it's now been turned into a movie by Netflix. And I feel like that's important to mention because honestly this reminds me of like creepypastas, and apparently, I don't know, I'm assuming it's Reddit, but if you go on Reddit there's like a whole Reddit thread on, I can't remember what it's called like The Old House or something, and like you can go into detail on, you know, people that have been there and all. It's not real, but if you go on Reddit, I think you can read all about it, and I don't know if there's links to follow and stuff, but this book has some Morse code at the end of the mixed media stuff, and it does actually spell out something, and luckily I went on TikTok and someone actually put it in the comments so I didn't have to work it out. But that's the kind of book that it is. It kind of throws you for a loop, and honestly, one of the best things that this does is at the end there is this huge like, what the hell just happened moment, and it's kind of left open. Like you could absolutely write more books about just this house, but having an open ending is just so cool because now I'm just gonna wonder for the rest of my days like what actually happened. I will also say that this is the first horror book that has genuinely spooked me. Like there were scenes that were giving The Grudge. Overall I gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. I heard some pretty mixed things on it. I've seen a lot of people that didn't really like it. I loved it. My mind was bent like a pretzel in the best way possible. So the next book that I ended up finishing in October, which was also my last book, was The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This is, I believe you would class it as a short story. It's quite short. It basically follows this young Korean American teenager who is in like her first year of college, and her parents are basically going through a breakup, and her mum ends up having this like meltdown, you know, and then she's also having to deal with her sister's kind of like emotions along with that as well. Eventually her mum ends up getting a new boyfriend, and Ji-won, who is our main character, ends up having these feelings and turning into a female serial killer. Now that absolutely sold me, and I think this book should come with a warning, specifically for people who have a fear of eyeballs, because there is some consumption of eyeballs in this book. When I went into this for my little horror reading blog, I don't know what I was expecting. It wasn't this. I should have known from the cover of the chopsticks with the eyeball. I should have known. Okay, I have a funny thing about eyeballs. I just can't. And it is explained in very, very graphic detail. So I think in the end this is classed as more of a body horror, which I don't actually think I've read anything in that genre before. So it was really interesting to read one for the first time. I went into this expecting horror. I went in expecting to be horrified, and I was horrified, but I think that the great thing about this book is that there's also so many kind of like deeper plots hidden within it. Obviously you're dealing with this young Korean American girl. Her mother ends up getting this, you know, white male all-American boyfriend, and he is a dick. He absolutely fetishizes Asian women, which is obviously a huge issue. This book deals with misogyny, racism, and it does it so, I don't want to say it does it subtly because it really doesn't, like it's in your face, but genuinely you're put into the shoes of this young woman. You can feel the anger. Like even as just like a woman, I can sympathise with her, and I'm not saying that murder's right, but she was right. I will also say, if you're ever in the mood to read anything that is going to ignite any feminine rage within you, this is a good read. I actually want to do a kind of like feminine rage reading vlog at some point. This would have been the perfect book to put in there, because honestly, you just feel so angry towards these men that she ends up facing. But overall, I think this was a debut, and if it is definitely a debut, I'd say it's a very, very strong debut, and I'm so glad I read this. I am glad I read it. I just wish I could stop having the visuals of eating eyeballs in my head, that would be great. But overall, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I'll definitely be keeping my eye out for more books written by this author, and I would definitely recommend it. So those are all of the books that I managed to read in October. If you've read any of the books that I did, then please leave a comment below letting me know what you thought of them. If not, what spooky reads did you read in the month that you would love to recommend to people? If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content from me, then don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. So bye guys.